The sun had barely set when Amina's world turned upside down. She stood at the edge of the village, heart pounding in her chest as she stared at the gathering in front of her. A group of girls, their faces hidden in the shadows, lingered around the center of the village. Their eyes, usually bright with dreams, were now clouded with something Amina couldn't place. A feeling she couldn't shake off, something wrong, something sinister. Amina had known these girls her whole life. They were her friends, her cousins, her neighbors. They had once played together in the dusty streets, shared secrets, and laughed until their voices echoed through the night. But now, they were like strangers. Strangers with dark eyes, hollow faces, and an air of mystery that clung to them like a second skin. She hesitated, her feet heavy as she took a step toward them. She had to know what was happening. Why had everything changed? The rumors had spread like wildfire, whispers in the marketplace, hushed conversations around the fire. Every girl in the village, no matter her age, no matter her status, was turning to the same fate. She could no longer ignore it. The questions swirled in her mind like a storm. What had driven them to make such a decision? Was it fear? Was it desperation? Or was it something darker, something she couldn't yet comprehend? Amina's heart ached at the thought. She had seen the pain in their eyes, the loss of hope, the quiet acceptance of something they could not control. She had seen it in her own mother's eyes when she heard the news of her younger sister, Miriam, who had made the same choice. Amina's own cousin. The girl she had played with as a child. And now Miriam was part of this. Amina had heard the whispers, seen the way people turned their eyes away in shame when her name was mentioned. She shook her head, pushing the thought aside. No, she couldn't think about that. Not yet. She had to understand why. She had to get the answers before it was too late. She had to stop whatever was happening, whatever force was dragging her village into this abyss. Amina took a deep breath and stepped forward. Her footsteps were slow, deliberate, her every movement weighed down by the gravity of the situation. She needed to speak to them. To understand. But just as she was about to call out, a voice cut through the air. Don't. Amina froze, her pulse quickening. She turned to find an older woman standing behind her. The woman's face was lined with age and hardship, but it was her eyes that held Amina's gaze. Eyes full of fear, regret, and something else. A warning. Don't go any closer, the woman repeated, her voice trembling. Once you know the truth, there's no turning back. Amina's heart skipped a beat. What truth? What was this woman talking about? She knew the woman, Fatima. She was the village healer, a woman who had seen and experienced much in her time. But Amina had never seen her like this before, so afraid, so broken. Fatima, what's going on? Amina asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Fatima stepped closer, her eyes darting toward the girls in the distance. Her hand shook as she reached out and gently grasped Amina's arm, pulling her back. You don't understand, Amina, she said, her voice strained with emotion. You think you can stop this, but you can't. It's already too late. The girls, all of them, they're caught in something far bigger than they are. And the truth will destroy you. Amina felt a cold shiver run down her spine. What truth? Fatima's gaze hardened for a moment, as if she was trying to summon the courage to speak. Then, with a deep sigh, she spoke in a hushed tone. There are forces in this village that you don't know about. Things that have been happening for years, long before you or I were born. The decision these girls are making. It's not something they chose freely. Something pushed them. Someone. Amina's mind raced as she tried to process the words. Forces? Someone? What was Fatima talking about? How could this be happening in her peaceful village? In their small, quiet community, nothing like this had ever occurred before. People might argue, people might fight over petty things, but no one had ever seen a tragedy like this before. But why? Amina asked, feeling her voice crack. Why are they doing this? What's the reason? Fatima glanced over her shoulder at the group of girls once more, then back at Amina. She seemed to hesitate, as if weighing her words carefully. Finally, she spoke. Because they have no choice. Because they've been trapped. All of them, in different ways. Some were promised things they thought they could never have. Others, well, some are being forced into it. The ones who refuse, those who fight back, they disappear. Amina's heart sank. Disappear? Fatima nodded gravely. Gone. Vanished without a trace. No one knows where they go, or who's behind it, but they never come back. Amina's mind spun. Disappear? Was that what had happened to Miriam? Had she been forced into this life because there was no other way? No other choice? But, why didn't anyone do anything? Why didn't the elders stop it? Amina's voice was rising now, her frustration boiling over. Why didn't anyone fight? Fatima's face softened with a sadness that made Amina's heart ache. You don't understand, child. You think you know this village. You think you know these people. But there are things that are hidden. Things we're not allowed to speak of. Amina felt the weight of the words settle heavily in her chest. Hidden things? Secrets buried deep? Was that what had kept this village silent? She had always thought that the people here were close-knit, that they shared everything. But now she saw how wrong she had been. There were things people had never spoken of. Things that now seemed to be unraveling in front of her. Fatima stepped back, her expression weary. You're too young to know this, Amina. I wish I could protect you from it. But it's too late for that now. If you want to know the truth, if you want to find out what's really happening, you'll have to dig deeper. But remember, once you do, there's no turning back. Amina stared at Fatima for a moment, her mind racing. She had to know the truth. She had to understand why everything was falling apart. She couldn't stand by and do nothing while her village was dragged into the darkness. But the question lingered in her mind, would she be able to survive the truth once it was uncovered? With determination in her eyes, Amina turned toward the group of girls once more. She knew what she had to do. I'll find out what's going on, Amina said quietly, more to herself than to Fatima. I won't stop until I know the truth. Fatima looked at her, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and pity. She opened her mouth to say something, but then stopped. Instead, she just shook her head, as if to warn Amina that there were things she could never unsee. Amina turned away, her mind set. She couldn't be afraid. She couldn't let fear stop her from uncovering the truth. Her village, her family, her friends, they all deserved to know what was happening. And so, Amina stepped forward, determined to uncover the secrets that had been buried for so long. Little did she know, the path she was about to walk would change everything she thought she knew about her village, her people, and herself. Amina couldn't sleep that night. The words Fatima had spoken echoed in her mind, replaying like a broken record. Once you know the truth, there's no turning back. She tossed and turned in her small bed, her thoughts spinning wildly. How could this be happening? Why hadn't anyone spoken out about the girls? Why hadn't anyone done something to stop it before it was too late? She could no longer ignore the gnawing curiosity inside her. It burned with a fierce intensity. Amina knew she had to find the answers, no matter the cost. The village she had grown up in, with its peaceful streets and familiar faces, was no longer the place she remembered. A dark cloud hung over everything, and it was time to lift it. At first light, Amina rose from her bed. The air was thick with tension, and the usual sounds of the village seemed muffled, as if the whole world was holding its breath. She didn't waste time. There was no more hesitation. No more waiting. She had to act. She quickly dressed, grabbed her shawl, and stepped outside into the cool morning air. The village was still quiet, the streets empty as most people were either still asleep or going about their daily routines. Amina walked briskly toward the center of the village, her heart pounding with anticipation. She needed to speak to the girls. She had to find out what had happened to them, what had changed them into people she barely recognized. As she approached the gathering place, she saw the group of girls again, standing in a huddled cluster near the village's old well. Their heads were bent low, their voices barely audible. They were talking, but their words were lost to Amina in the distance. She walked closer, making sure to keep a careful distance, not wanting to alert them to her presence just yet. Amina observed them carefully. Some of the girls had their faces covered with scarves, while others were looking down at the ground. A few of them had their arms wrapped around their bodies in a way that seemed almost protective, as though they were guarding something, a secret, a pain, something none of them wanted to share. She noticed Miriam among them. Her heart stopped for a moment. It was impossible to miss the familiar face of her younger cousin, who used to laugh and play with her as a child. Miriam was standing with her back to Amina, her head lowered. The change in her was undeniable. She no longer had the bright eyes of the girl Amina once knew. Now, her face was pale, and her body language was stiff, almost as if she was afraid of something. Or someone. Amina's stomach twisted. She couldn't bear to watch her cousin like this, but she knew she had to act. She needed to know what had happened, what had led Miriam down this dark path. With every step closer to the group, Amina's heart raced faster. She was filled with a mixture of fear and determination. Fear of what she might uncover, but determination to do what no one else seemed willing to do, get to the bottom of the mystery. She approached the group slowly, her eyes never leaving Miriam. It was time. She had to confront them. But how? Before Amina could take another step, a voice broke through her thoughts. "You're not supposed to be here." Amina froze. It was Miriam's voice. Low, shaky, but unmistakable. She slowly turned around to find her cousin staring at her from across the small distance that separated them. Miriam's face was empty, her eyes distant, and for a moment, Amina wondered if she even recognized her. "Miriam," Amina began, but the words caught in her throat. She had no idea what to say. There were no words for this kind of pain, no way to ease the hurt that seemed to hang in the air between them. Miriam shook her head slowly. "You shouldn't be here, Amina," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's too dangerous." Amina took a step forward, her heart aching for her cousin. "What's going on, Miriam? Why are you and the others doing this?" She could barely hold back the tears as she spoke. "I don't understand. Why didn't you come to me for help? We could have figured something out." Miriam's eyes flickered with a brief, fleeting moment of sadness, but it quickly vanished behind a veil of coldness. She looked away, almost as if she was ashamed of herself. "You wouldn't understand," Miriam muttered, her voice breaking. "You wouldn't believe me even if I told you." "I will believe you, Miriam," Amina said urgently. "You're my family. I'm not going to turn away. Please, tell me. What's going on?" Miriam took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling with a heavy sigh. For a moment, she seemed to battle with herself, as though she wanted to speak but was unable to. Then, without warning, she turned and motioned for Amina to follow her. Amina didn't hesitate. She quickly closed the gap between them, walking in step with Miriam, who led her down a narrow, winding path leading away from the village square. They walked in silence for several minutes, the weight of the conversation still hanging between them. Amina tried to catch Miriam's eye, but her cousin kept her gaze fixed on the ground, as though she feared making eye contact. Finally, they reached a secluded spot near the edge of the village, where the trees thickened, and the air grew cooler. Miriam stopped and turned to face Amina. "I'm not the only one," Miriam whispered, her voice trembling. "It's all the girls. All of us. We've been chosen." "Chosen?" Amina echoed, her confusion deepening. Miriam nodded, her face pale. "There's a group, Amina. They came to the village months ago. They promised us everything. Money. Power. Security. They made it sound like a dream. They told us that we would never have to worry again, that we would be special." Amina's heart sank. "Who are they? What group?" Miriam shook her head quickly. I don't know their names. I've never seen their faces. They wear masks. But they promised us freedom, and we believed them. We all believed them. Amina's mind raced as she tried to make sense of Miriam's words. A group of people had come to the village, offering promises of freedom in exchange for, what? And why had Miriam and the others agreed to such a dangerous deal? What happened after that? Amina asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Miriam's eyes darkened. At first, it was easy. They gave us money. They made us feel special. But as time went on, things changed. They began asking more from us. They started to make demands, things we didn't want to do. And anyone who tried to refuse, well, they disappeared. Amina felt a cold shiver crawl up her spine. What do you mean, disappeared? Miriam's face twisted with fear. I don't know. They just vanished. One day, they were there, and the next day, nothing. No one talks about them anymore. And if you try to leave, they threaten you. They say they'll make sure you never see your family again. Amina's mind whirled with 1,000 thoughts. This was bigger than she had imagined. There was something far more sinister at play here. And it wasn't just about the girls. It was about power. Control. Manipulation. Who are these people, Miriam? Amina asked again. What do they want with you? I don't know, Amina. I really don't, Miriam said, her voice breaking. But I have to do what they say. Or else. Amina placed a hand on her cousin's shoulder, her heart aching for the girl who had once been so full of life. I won't let this happen to you, Miriam. I'll find a way to stop them. Miriam looked at her with a mixture of gratitude and fear. You can't. It's too late for me. But maybe you can save the others. Amina's resolve hardened. She would not let this continue. She had to uncover the truth, no matter how dangerous it was. The village had to know. The girls had to be saved. With a final look at Miriam, Amina turned and walked away, her mind racing with thoughts of what to do next. She had started something new. There was no turning back. Amina couldn't stop thinking about Miriam's words. The fear in her cousin's voice lingered in her mind, gnawing at her every waking moment. She had to find out more. The pieces of the puzzle were still scattered, and though the picture was beginning to take shape, there was still so much to uncover. But where could she go for answers? Who could she trust? As Amina paced through the narrow village lanes, her thoughts raced. The elders, the ones who had witnessed the arrival of this mysterious group, were the key. They had seen it all, or at least, they should have. They had lived in this village long before anyone like them came around. But getting information from them wouldn't be easy. The elders were a tight-knit group, fiercely protective of their secrets. They didn't speak to outsiders easily, especially not to someone like Amina, who had only recently returned to the village after years of absence. She needed to find a way in. She needed to speak to someone who could tell her the truth, someone who had witnessed what had really happened. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the village as Amina arrived at the old, weathered community center where the elders often gathered. It was a simple building made of stone and wood, but it held a sense of history, of secrets long buried beneath its walls. She had heard stories about it when she was a child, how the elders would sit in the center of the room and discuss matters of importance. But now, it felt like a place shrouded in mystery, where more questions than answers resided. Amina hesitated for a moment, standing outside the heavy wooden door. She wasn't sure if she was ready to face the truths that might lie beyond it. But she knew she had no choice. Her resolve had already been set. There was no turning back now. With a deep breath, she pushed open the door. Inside, the room was dimly lit, the only source of light coming from the small windows along the stone walls. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and incense, a fragrance that seemed to hold the weight of years of untold stories. At a large, worn table in the center of the room, several figures sat in silence, their faces lined with age and wisdom. They were the elders, the keepers of the village's history and its darkest secrets. One of them, an elderly woman named Amina, had known since childhood, looked up as she entered. Her name was Zainab, and she had always been a figure of strength in the village, known for her calm demeanor and unwavering authority. Zainab's eyes softened when she saw Amina, but there was something in her gaze that made Amina's heart skip a beat. It was a look of caution, of suspicion. Something wasn't right. Amina, Zainab greeted her, her voice steady but guarded. What brings you here? Amina stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. I need to speak with you, she said, her voice shaking slightly. It's about the girls. And what happened to them? The room fell silent. The elders exchanged quick, knowing glances, but none of them spoke. Amina felt their eyes on her, the weight of their silent judgment pressing down on her shoulders. She could almost hear their thoughts. Why is she asking about this? Is she ready to hear the truth? I don't understand what's going on, Amina continued, her voice gaining strength. Miriam, my cousin, she's changed. The girls, they're not the same. Something is happening here, and I need to know what it is. I need to know who is behind all of this. Zainab studied her for a long moment, her wrinkled face unreadable. Finally, she sighed deeply and stood up. Come with me, she said, her tone no longer a stern. It was softer now, almost sad. There are things you do not understand, Amina. Things that cannot be spoken in the open. Amina followed her without hesitation, her curiosity bubbling up inside her. Zainab led her through a narrow hallway at the back of the community center, the walls lined with dusty shelves filled with ancient books and artifacts. The air grew colder as they moved deeper into the building, and Amina's unease grew with every step. Where was Zainab taking her? Finally, they stopped at a door at the far end of the hallway. Zainab turned to her, her expression serious. Before you ask any more questions, you must understand one thing, Zainab said softly. This village has a history that goes far beyond what you know. It's a history that was built on trust, secrecy, and survival. And some secrets are meant to stay hidden. Zainab opened the door, revealing a small, dimly lit room. Inside, a single candle flickered on a table, casting long shadows across the stone walls. On the far wall hung a map of the village, but it wasn't just any map. It was old, weathered, and marked with symbols and lines that didn't make sense to Amina. What was all of this? Zainab motioned for Amina to sit. I will tell you what I know. But you must promise me something. You cannot share this with anyone else. Not yet. Amina sat, her mind racing with questions, but she nodded solemnly. I promise. Zainab took a deep breath before she began. This village was founded many generations ago. It was a safe haven for people who had nowhere else to go. We welcomed everyone, immigrants, refugees, travelers. We offered them protection and a place to build a life. But with that protection came a price. Amina leaned in, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the weight of the words she was about to hear. The price was loyalty, Zainab continued. Loyalty to the land, to the people, to the traditions. And loyalty to something much more powerful than any of us. Something that has kept the village safe for centuries. Amina's mind raced. What was Zainab talking about? Something powerful? Something hidden? There is a secret society, Zainab whispered, her voice barely audible. A group that has existed since the village's founding. They protect us. But in return, they demand something. They ask for sacrifices. They take the girls, Amina. They take them and use them for their own purposes. Amina's blood ran cold. She had suspected as much, but hearing Zainab confirm it made her stomach churn. Sacrifices? Amina whispered. What do you mean? What are they doing to the girls? Zainab's eyes grew dark, and she looked away, as though unable to face the truth she had just spoken. They don't just take the girls, Amina. They use them for their power. They trade them for protection. For wealth. For influence. The girls are, Zainab paused, clearly struggling with the words. The girls are vessels. They're used to maintain the power of the society. They are part of a much larger, darker ritual that we can't stop. We've tried. Amina felt the room spin around her. Her mind couldn't comprehend what she was hearing. A secret society. Rituals. Girls being used as pawns. It sounded like something out of a nightmare. But why didn't you stop it? Amina demanded. Why didn't anyone do anything? Zainab looked up, her eyes filled with sadness and regret. We couldn't. The society is too powerful. They control everything. If we spoke out, we'd be destroyed. The village would fall apart. We'd be exposed. Amina's heart was racing. She felt a mix of anger and helplessness. This was beyond anything she could have imagined. But she couldn't back down now. She had to find a way to stop it. She had to save the girls. Mariam. Tell me how to stop it, Amina said, her voice steady with determination. Tell me how we can end this. Zainab stared at her for a long moment, her face filled with a sorrow that spoke volumes. I wish I knew, child. I wish I knew. The air felt heavy with tension as Amina left the small, dimly lit room where Zainab had shared her shocking revelations. The weight of the secret was unbearable, and her mind spun in a whirlwind of confusion and disbelief. A secret society, rituals, girls being used for power, it sounded like a nightmare. But this was her reality. This was the truth she had uncovered. As Amina walked back through the narrow hallways of the community center, she couldn't help but feel the enormity of what she had learned. The village she had grown up in, the place she once thought of as safe, was hiding a dark underbelly, a place where ancient traditions and terrifying practices held more power than the truth itself. And now she was caught in the middle of it all. Amina's thoughts were interrupted when she heard a voice calling her name. She turned to see Mariam standing in the doorway, her eyes wide with concern. Amina felt a pang in her chest. She had been so caught up in her search for answers that she had barely spoken to her cousin since her return. But now was not the time for small talk. The stakes were too high. Mariam, we need to talk, Amina said, her voice urgent. It's about what's been happening to the girls. About the society. Mariam's face drained of color. She glanced around quickly, making sure no one else was nearby. Then, she pulled Amina aside into a secluded corner. What did you learn? Mariam asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Amina hesitated for a moment. It's worse than I thought. There's a group, the elders, they call it a society. They take the girls, Mariam. They use them in rituals, for power. They control everything. They keep the village safe by offering sacrifices. Mariam's breath caught in her throat. Her eyes filled with fear, and for a moment, Amina could see the weight of what she was hearing settle in. Mariam had always been brave, but now, the truth was too much. Amina had no idea how to comfort her. How could she, when the situation was beyond comprehension? So, you're telling me it's true? Mariam's voice trembled. Everything I've heard? About the sacrifices, the rituals? Amina nodded, her voice breaking. Yes. It's all true. The society controls everything. They've been doing this for generations. Mariam swallowed hard, her eyes distant as she processed the information. Amina could see the sadness in her cousin's eyes, the deep sorrow of someone who had already been through so much. She had been through the ritual, in some twisted sense, just by being in the village. But Amina had to wonder, how much of it had she truly understood before? I don't know what to do with this, Mariam said quietly, tears welling in her eyes. I don't know how to stop it. Amina reached out, taking her cousin's hand. We will stop it. Together. I don't care how much power they have. I won't let them do this to any more girls. Not you, not anyone. Mariam looked up, her face filled with resolve. For the first time since Amina had arrived, she saw a spark of hope in her cousin's eyes. Amina couldn't help but feel a sense of purpose building inside her as well. She couldn't stand by and let this happen. There had to be a way to bring this darkness into the light. What can we do? Miriam asked, her voice strong now. We can't just confront them. They're too powerful. Amina thought for a moment, her mind racing. We need to find out more. We need to learn everything we can about the society, how it operates, who's involved. We need to figure out where they meet, what they're planning. The more we know, the stronger we'll be. But how? Miriam asked, her brow furrowing. They won't let us near them. They're too secretive. Amina's gaze hardened. We have to be smart. We'll have to sneak around. Find the people who know the most, the ones who've seen things, witnesses who are too afraid to speak out. We'll gather information, piece by piece. And when we have enough, we'll expose them. Miriam nodded slowly, her eyes determined. But where do we start? Amina glanced around the village square, her eyes scanning the familiar faces. There's one person who might be able to help. Someone who's been through the same thing, someone who might be able to give us answers. Her name is Fatima. She's the one who tried to escape. She's the one who saw what happened, and they caught her. Amina could see the shock in Miriam's eyes. Fatima? I thought she disappeared years ago. She did, Amina confirmed. But I heard rumors that she's still alive, hiding in the outskirts of the village. If anyone knows how to stop this, it's her. The two cousins exchanged a determined glance. This was their chance. Fatima was the key to everything. If she could help them, they might stand a chance at ending this madness once and for all. The journey to find Fatima was not an easy one. The village outskirts were remote, a place where few ventured and even fewer returned. The roads were narrow and treacherous, surrounded by dense trees that blocked out the sun. The village had long stopped acknowledging the existence of those who lived on the fringes, but Amina knew they had no choice. They had to find Fatima. She was their only hope. As they walked through the dense forest, the sounds of the village grew quieter with every step. Amina felt the weight of the silence pressing on her shoulders, but she pushed forward. She couldn't afford to hesitate now. There was too much at stake. They finally arrived at a small, dilapidated hut on the edge of the forest. It was barely standing, the walls cracked and covered with vines. It looked abandoned, but Amina had heard whispers that Fatima had been seen here, hiding from those who wanted her dead. Amina knocked softly on the door, her heart pounding in her chest. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a figure standing in the shadows. Amina's breath caught as she recognized the face. Fatima. She looked different, her eyes were hollow, her once vibrant skin pale and worn. But despite the passage of time and the hardship she had endured, Amina could still see the fire in her eyes. The same fire that had burned in her own when she had first come to this village, full of hope and excitement. Now, that fire was all but extinguished. You're Amina, right? Fatima's voice was raspy, barely a whisper. What do you want? Amina stepped forward, her voice steady but filled with urgency. We need your help, Fatima. We know about the society. We know what they've been doing. You're the only one who can help us stop them. Fatima's eyes narrowed as she studied them. You don't know what you're asking for, she warned. This isn't a game, Amina. You don't fight them. They'll destroy you. They'll destroy everything. Amina didn't flinch. We don't have a choice. We need to stop them. We can't let this continue. Fatima's gaze softened slightly. She sighed, stepping aside and motioning for them to come in. Fine, she muttered. But you need to understand something. The society isn't just a group of people. It's a force. A power that runs deeper than you realize. Once you enter, there's no way out. As they stepped inside the dark hut, Amina felt the weight of Fatima's words settling in. This wasn't just about stopping a group of people. This was about fighting an ancient power, one that could destroy everything they knew. But Amina wasn't backing down. Not now. Not when so much was at stake. And as they sat together, the plan began to take shape. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be pretty. But it was their only hope. The air in Fatima's small hut was thick with unease as Amina, Mariam, and Fatima sat around a low wooden table. The flickering light from a single candle cast long shadows across the room, making the already tense atmosphere feel even more suffocating. Amina's heart raced as she listened to Fatima, who had become their reluctant guide through the treacherous maze of secrets they were determined to uncover. "I'm not going to sugarcoat this," Fatima began, her voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes were dark with years of pain and regret. "The society you're trying to expose is not just some group of elders who meet in secret. It's far more than that. It's a network, a powerful organization that stretches beyond this village. They've been operating for centuries. They control everything." Amina leaned forward, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "What do you mean, they control everything?" Fatima paused, as if weighing her words carefully. "They control the village's wealth, the politics, the land. They even control who lives and who dies. But it's not just power for the sake of power. There's something darker at play. They use the girls for rituals, yes. But those rituals are meant to summon something ancient, something beyond our understanding." Mariam shook her head, her face pale. "What do you mean summon? What could they be trying to bring?" Fatima's eyes seemed to darken even further. She looked over her shoulder, as though checking to make sure no one was listening, before leaning in closer. "The society believes that by sacrificing the girls, they can open a portal, a gateway to another realm. A realm where a being of immense power exists. A being they believe can grant them immortality." The words hit Amina like a slap. "Immortality?" she echoed. "You're saying they're trying to bring something from another realm to live forever?" Fatima nodded slowly, her expression grim. "Yes. They believe that by feeding this being the life force of innocent girls, they will gain eternal life. They've been doing it for generations. And every time they sacrifice a girl, they get closer to unlocking the full power of the portal." Amina's mind was reeling. She had heard of cults and secret societies before, but this was beyond anything she could have imagined. And it was happening right under her nose. She had thought that exposing the society's cruelty would be enough to stop them, but now she realized that they weren't just interested in power for the sake of wealth. They were playing with forces far greater than they understood. "How do they do it?" Amina asked, her voice shaking. "How do they perform these rituals?" Fatima sighed deeply. "The rituals are ancient. They require specific days, times, and places. There's a sacred temple hidden deep in the forest. That's where the final ritual takes place. But it's not just about the sacrifice. They need something else, a bloodline. A girl with a certain connection to the other realm. And they believe that one of you, Mariam, specifically, has that connection." Mariam stiffened. "Me? But why?" Fatima's eyes locked onto Mariam's with an intensity that sent a chill down Amina's spine. "Because your family bloodline is the key. Your ancestors were the ones who first opened the gateway. And now, the society believes that your blood will unlock the final door." Amina's breath caught in her throat. The implications of what Fatima was saying were unimaginable. Mariam was being hunted, not just because she was a girl, but because of who she was. Her bloodline made her the ultimate prize in their twisted rituals. "Mariam," Amina whispered, "we need to get you out of here. Now." But Mariam didn't move. Instead, she stared at Fatima, her face pale but oddly calm. "What happens if they succeed?" she asked quietly. Fatima's lips trembled as she spoke. "If they succeed, they will gain the power to control not just this village, but every village, every city. They'll rule the world. And the worst part is that they won't stop. They'll keep using innocent girls until they've drained the life force of every last one. Amina's chest tightened. It was one thing to know that the society was corrupt and cruel. It was another to realize the true extent of their plans. This wasn't just about stopping a few bad people, it was about stopping an ancient, malevolent force that could bring ruin to everything they knew. And if they failed, there would be no one left to stop them. Fatima, Amina said, her voice shaky, you've been through this. You know how they operate. You know what to do. Please, tell us how we can stop them. Fatima's eyes flickered with something, regret, fear, maybe even guilt. The only way to stop them is to destroy the temple. You have to destroy the heart of the ritual, the place where the portal is opened. If you do that, you'll sever their connection to the other realm. Amina and Miriam exchanged a look. How do we do that? Amina asked, her voice tight with urgency. Fatima hesitated, then spoke slowly. The temple is protected. Only the elders can enter it. But there's a way in. There's a secret path, an underground passage that leads directly into the heart of the temple. If you can find it, you can destroy the portal. Amina nodded. Where is this path? How do we find it? Fatima's eyes were distant as she spoke. The entrance is hidden beneath an old, abandoned well near the temple. You'll have to follow the markings on the walls. But be careful, once you enter, you'll be in their territory. The elders will know you're there. They'll stop at nothing to protect their secret. Amina felt a wave of nausea wash over her. They were going to have to walk into the lion's den, into the very heart of the society's power. But there was no other choice. This was the only way to stop them. We have to do this, Amina said, her voice firm. We can't let them continue. We can't let them take anyone else. Fatima nodded slowly, her expression resigned. I'll help you. I know the way. But once you go in, there's no turning back. Miriam's voice was barely a whisper. What if we fail? Fatima's gaze was heavy with sadness. Then it's over. Everything you've known, everything you've loved, will be gone. Amina swallowed hard. They didn't have a choice. They had to succeed. For the girls, for the village, for the future. As the night wore on, Fatima shared what she knew about the temple and the ritual that awaited them. The details were harrowing, but they were necessary. They couldn't afford to go in blind. When the time came, they would have to move quickly, decisively. Amina's mind raced as she thought about what lay ahead. They were about to face the unknown, to fight against forces that had been in power for centuries. It would be dangerous, maybe even deadly. But she couldn't back down. Not now. Not when Miriam's life, and the lives of so many others, were on the line. Tomorrow, they would leave. Tomorrow, they would enter the forest, follow the hidden path, and destroy the portal before it was too late. But deep in her heart, Amina knew one thing, this was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a fight for everything that mattered. And they couldn't afford to lose. The sun was just beginning to rise over the horizon, casting a dim golden light across the village. Amina, Miriam, and Fatima stood in the small clearing at the edge of the forest, the weight of their mission pressing heavily on their shoulders. The air was cool, and the quiet of the morning was almost unnerving. Amina's heart pounded in her chest as she looked at Miriam, whose face was pale but resolute. Are you ready? Amina asked softly, her voice tight with anticipation. Miriam nodded, her jaw set. I don't think we have any other choice. We have to stop them. Fatima, standing slightly behind them, gave a small, grim nod. She had agreed to guide them, but Amina could see that even she was nervous. There was no turning back now. They had come too far to fail. The path into the forest was dark and overgrown, the trees towering above them like silent sentinels. The air felt thick with tension, as though the forest itself was aware of the danger lurking within. Amina knew that with every step they took, they were getting closer to the heart of the society's power, to the very temple where the ancient ritual would take place. The stakes couldn't be higher. We need to keep quiet, Fatima said, her voice barely a whisper. The society's eyes are everywhere. If we make a sound, they'll know we're coming. Amina nodded, her throat dry. She couldn't afford to think too much about the danger. If she did, she might freeze, and that wasn't an option. She had to push forward, for Miriam, for the other girls, for the future. They walked in silence for what felt like hours, the dense forest pressing in around them. The only sounds were the occasional rustle of leaves underfoot and the distant calls of birds. Amina tried to focus on the task at hand, but her mind kept wandering to what they were about to face. The society wasn't just a group of villagers, they were part of something much darker, something that stretched far beyond the confines of this small community. Fatima led them through a narrow, winding trail that seemed to disappear into the trees. Every so often, she would glance over her shoulder, making sure they weren't being followed. The further they went, the more Amina could feel the weight of the ancient forest around them, as if the trees themselves were hiding secrets too dark to reveal. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they arrived at a clearing. At the center of the clearing stood an old stone well, its surface weathered by time and covered in thick vines. The well looked ordinary enough, but Amina's heart skipped a beat as Fatima moved toward it. "This is it," Fatima said softly, her voice tinged with both fear and determination. "The entrance to the hidden passage." Amina's eyes scanned the area, her senses on high alert. The well looked harmless, but she knew better than to underestimate the society's ability to conceal their secrets. Fatima knelt down beside the well and began pulling at the vines, revealing a set of worn stone steps that spiraled down into the darkness. "The path leads directly to the temple," Fatima explained. "But it's not going to be easy. The elders will know we're coming the moment we enter. We have to move fast, and we have to stay quiet. They have traps, guards, everything." Miriam swallowed hard. "Are you sure we can do this?" Fatima met her gaze, her expression grim but resolute. "We don't have a choice. You're the key. You have to stop them." Amina looked at Miriam, her heart heavy. The weight of the responsibility was crushing, but she knew that if they failed, the society's plans would come to fruition, and the world as they knew it would be lost. There was no turning back now. "We're ready," Amina said firmly, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. Fatima nodded, then descended into the well, her movements swift and purposeful. Amina followed closely behind, and Miriam brought up the rear. The air grew colder as they descended, the stone steps slick with moisture. The darkness was suffocating, and Amina could feel her pulse quickening with every step. They had to hurry. The longer they stayed in the well, the more chances the society had to catch up with them. When they finally reached the bottom, Amina's eyes struggled to adjust to the pitch-black darkness. Fatima pulled out a small torch and lit it, casting an eerie glow over the narrow, damp tunnel that stretched out before them. "This way," Fatima said, her voice low. The tunnel was cramped, the walls close enough to make Amina feel claustrophobic. The air was thick with dust, and the smell of earth and decay clung to everything. As they moved deeper into the passage, Amina couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. It was as if the very walls were closing in on them, ready to swallow them whole. The path seemed to stretch on forever, but eventually, Fatima stopped. She held up her hand, signaling for them to halt. "This is it," she whispered, her eyes scanning the darkness. "We're just below the temple now." Amina felt a chill run down her spine. They were so close now, so close to stopping the ritual, to ending the society's reign of terror. But the danger was real. They couldn't afford any mistakes. One wrong move, and it would all be over. Fatima pointed to a small, narrow opening in the wall ahead. "That leads into the temple. Once you go through, you'll be in the heart of the ritual chamber. It's the only way in." Amina nodded, her throat tight. "And once we're in there?" Fatima hesitated, her expression clouded with uncertainty. "You'll have to destroy the portal. I don't know how, but you'll know when the time comes. Just trust your instincts. But be careful, there's no telling how the elders will react." Amina and Miriam exchanged a look, then nodded in unison. They had come this far, and they weren't about to back down now. With one final look at Fatima, Amina stepped forward, her hand brushing against the rough stone of the passage. She could feel the heat of the torch flickering behind her, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. The narrow opening was just ahead, the path to the temple waiting. But as she reached for it, a sudden noise froze her in place. A soft, almost imperceptible click echoed through the tunnel, followed by the faint sound of footsteps. "Get back!" Fatima hissed, her voice sharp with urgency. "They've found us." Amina's heart pounded in her chest as she turned toward the noise. The elders were here. They had been waiting for them all along. Without a second thought, Amina grabbed Miriam's hand and pulled her toward the opening. Fatima followed close behind, her torch flickering wildly in her grasp. "Move!" Amina shouted, adrenaline surging through her veins. They rushed forward, the narrow passageway growing even tighter as they pushed through the opening and into the temple's heart. The air was thick with the scent of incense, and the sound of chanting echoed through the cavernous space. A large stone altar stood at the center of the room, surrounded by dark figures, elders, their faces obscured by robes. But at the center of it all stood a portal. A swirling vortex of light and shadow, pulsing with an energy that Amina could feel deep in her bones. "Miriam!" Amina shouted, pulling her toward the altar. "We have to stop it." But as they moved closer, the elders raised their hands, chanting louder, their voices rising in unison. The portal flared to life, growing brighter and more intense. And in that moment, Amina knew, they had to act, and they had to act now. The fate of everything rested in their hands.